It's interesting because right now, I think when people write stories, that the industry's in so much pain.
Mhm.
And so we're writing these things from a very pained place. And I don't necessarily know what message we're sending to people about veterinary medicine. Mostly it's just like, please be nice to us because we're so upset. And that's fair and that's valid. But at the same token, it would be really nice to hear from those people that are successful and doing well because they're out there. And I think that that message needs to be out there, not only for pet owners, but for your colleagues to see. Because what I see over and over are people telling these stories about, I'm being treated terribly by my boss, I'm being treated horribly by clients, and the solution is for you all to be nicer. But that's not life, right? And I think what so many people, what I wish that they could see or understand is you have the you you don't have to live your life in a toxic, miserable place. And I think that's the narrative that we've sort of gotten ourselves into. Like, you can be happy in this profession, and you should be happy in this profession.
Hello, my name is Debbie Boone, and I want to welcome you to my podcast, The Bend, where we explore how successful people navigated the path and emerged in a better place when life threw them an unexpected twist. It's inspired by one of my favorite sayings: the bend in the road is not the end of the road unless you fail to make the curve. These conversations will hopefully help you and inspire you to embrace your personal bend and to flourish. I hope you enjoy it, and if you need help with your own personal navigation and you're in veterinary medicine, please feel free to reach out to me at Debbie Boone 2 Manage Vets Consulting. Enjoy the bend and be inspired by our wonderful guest. Welcome. There we go. Well, welcome everyone to this episode of The Bend. And today I am so happy to have Dr. Jessica Vogelsang with me. Jessica and I actually met probably on LinkedIn and then ran into each other at a VMX meeting, and we felt like we'd known each other forever. We just stood there and talked like old friends. And so I'm really happy to have her here. She is a veterinarian. She's a speaker. She's a national media presence. She's an author. She wrote a book called All Dogs Go to Kevin. She is the founder of Pawcurious, which is one of the first veterinary-authored sites on the web. She is one of the first social media mavens. She has really helped so many people with a lot of those negative reviews and getting the word out about how wonderful their practices are. She graduated from UC Davis School of Veterinary Medicine. She has experience in emergency medicine, palliative medicine, and general practice. She's written for every major publication there is. She is heavily involved in the veterinary telemedicine space. And she also has now accepted a position with the American Animal Hospital Association and is doing content and creation for them. So this woman can't say no. I feel you.
That is true. That is
can't
true.
say no either. So yes, we have these interesting and long bios.
It makes me feel very old.
Oh, you have no idea. We don't even want to talk about
Yeah.
When I tell people I started in vet med in 1985, and I said, if you weren't born then, don't even tell me that.
No, I don't want to know
if you were not born.
Right. Yes.
So let's start with your origin story. Tell me a little bit about how you got from the nub, which is my godfather used to call it being in the hole. When you were young and a kid, to becoming where you are an author and all these wonderful things that you've accomplished.
Yeah. So when I was growing up, I wanted to go to medical school because people medical school, my mom was a nurse and I just thought that seemed really cool. And right around the mid 90s, doctors were going through the same thing that I think veterinarians are now, where they're like, don't do it, like so burned out. Ugh. So they completely discouraged me for that, but I didn't really know what else I wanted to do. So I was exploring biomedical engineering at the University of Minnesota. And one day I was like, my job was to count cells under a microscope, and it was really numbing my brain. This was not the right thing for me. But I was watching them do a valve transplant, and they were doing it in a pig. And the vet students were there, and they kind of went swaggering in, right? And at the end of the surgery, the surgeons told the vet students that they could suture the skin. And you would have thought that they told them they won the lottery. Like, they were so excited, and they jumped in, like, yes, this pig is gonna have the best suture ever. And I'd never seen that level of enthusiasm before. So that's when I said, that looks good. Why don't I try that?
Why not that, right? Why not?
Yeah, completely random.
Now, obviously, you've followed through with that and went through with the profession UC Davis. You were an emergency veterinarian for a while. I know that. And you and I have talked this story before. So tell me about the curveball that life threw you that kind of said, when you said, okay, I got to change paths.
Yeah, so when I was going through vet school, I wasn't quite sure what direction I wanted to go with it, because even though biomedical engineering wasn't that exciting for me, I still liked research and I liked exploring and learning new things. But it was very difficult when you get out of school to then commit to another 4 years for a PhD. I wasn't really ready for that. So I went into small animal medicine, and I liked it. I was in it for about 8 or 9 years. And this is the reason that I do so much speaking about crisis and social media and reviews and all that stuff, because we had an incident at our clinic that wound up on the local media. And because of the way it was handled, every single thing we did was like the wrong choice. If you're doing a choose your own adventure, every opportunity to de-escalate, things got escalated, and it ended up being an 18-month court battle. Yeah. And at the end of that, I couldn't even talk about it for years, because I would just cry just thinking about it. And it was so traumatic for me, I think, to kind of have this expectation that you were going to have a good relationship with your clients. And it shattered every bit of trust I had with anybody who walked through the door. And that's when I said, something has to change. I have to take some time off and get my head around this, because it's not fair to all the wonderful clients for me to walk in with my hackles up every single time. And that's where I was at when I decided that I needed to take some time off. So that was my curveball, the first one.
The first one. Now, is that when you wrote the book?
No, that actually that happened maybe like 6 months into writing my blog. So it absolutely made me petrified to write about anything with veterinary medicine. The book came about in 2014, after I'd been blogging for about 4 or 5 years. So I had, just been storytelling on the blog forever. And I did it kind of the opposite, how you're supposed to write a book. People always ask me, how do you do it? I was like, well, I did it this way, but most people don't. Like, I found a publisher first and then an agent, and then I wrote the book, and usually it's the reverse.
Yeah, that's true.
But having the body of work that I'd been doing for 5 years made that opportunity really easy to find me.
So when you started Pawcurious, how did that start? Was it like you just saw this hole of information that needed to be shared and just started writing?
Yeah. So at the time, so this is 2009, there was very little stuff online. Facebook hadn't really taken off yet. People were blogging. It was the mom blogs. But if you wanted information about your pet, you were basically going to message boards. And like, if you were into pizza, you would be getting messages from your Big Green Egg message board thing about your pets, like completely random and terrible. And so I said, I really want to start trying to create some of this information and put that out there. And at the same time, just share a little bit about my life, because I wanted people to sort of see what being a veterinarian was like from the other side, because I think that really, and it still is, that storytelling is really important for people. And I was hopeful that if at least they knew and liked this one vet and saw me as a person first, and maybe they would carry that trust over to their relationship with their own vets.
Mhm. Did you feel like you succeeded in that? Did you get a lot of feedback from people that were talking about what they didn't know? I talked a lot about this on other podcasts about unrealistic expectations, I think, of becoming a veterinarian. That we've laughed about the James Herriot thing, the fractured fairy tale,
Yeah, you
right?
started.
Yeah. So, I just kind of think a lot of times people get into veterinary medicine, they have a false idea of what it's really like. And I can't even tell you as a hiring manager how many times I had people say to me, well, I want to work here because I don't like people. And I was like,
It's
well,
bad.
guess what? Attached to
Yeah.
all these animals is a human. And if you don't deal with them well, you don't get to do any of the stuff, the medical stuff. So we have to like people first and then
Yes.
animals. So do you feel like you were able to shine some light on that with Pawcurious?
Yes and no. Because for those reasons that I just said, you have to be really careful about how you talk about specific things that happen at work, which was a lesson I saw a few people fall on their face with early on. I think we're getting better at that. Um, it's interesting because right now, I think when people write stories, of the industry's in so much pain.
Mhm.
And so we're writing these things from a very pained place. And I don't necessarily know what message we're sending to people about veterinary medicine. Mostly it's just like, please be nice to us because we're so upset. And that's fair and that's valid. But at the same token, it would be really nice to hear from those people that are successful and doing well because they're out there. And I think that that message needs to be out there, not only for pet owners, but for your colleagues to see. Because what I see over and over are people telling these stories about, I'm being treated terribly by my boss, I'm being treated horribly by clients, and the solution is for you all to be nicer. But that's not life, right? And I think what so many people, what I wish that they could see or understand is you have you don't have to live your life in a toxic, miserable place. And I think that's the narrative that we've sort of gotten ourselves into. Like, you can be happy in this profession and you should be happy in this profession. And I spent 10 years being unhappy. So I get it. And it took a lot of work to get to the point where I love what I do. But it was kind of shocking to me to talk to my husband who works in IT or other people, like they like what they do. They always have.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, so
Yeah.
those are the stories that I wish we could tell more of because I think we need them.
Well, I think human nature is drawn to the negative, and we know
Yes.
that. It's just the way our brain works. And so I think I read this yesterday. It takes 3 positive messages to overcome 1 negative. And we have gotten into a spiral,
Yes.
kind of gone down this rabbit hole of all we talk about is the negative parts. And there are people out there who have tried to share some of the positive things, but I think they're the quiet people. They're the ones who are just kind of going along their day going, gee, I really feel sorry for those people, but that's not my life.
Yeah.
And there's a great deal of people who actually love what they do and love going to work and like their clients and their work. And I think sometimes the physical demands are what is pulling those people down because they really do love what they're doing, but physically it's a demanding job. And I think that's another thing that we're not addressing very well in veterinary medicine. I have a good friend who is a Pilates and yoga instructor. And I said, Rachel, I wish you would come up with a course or a class that would teach people how to protect their backs, how
Oh,
to
that'd be
protect
nice.
their bodies, their knees, because if this is so physical, we're up and down off the floor 500 times a day, lifting things that are either dead weight or wiggling away from us. And if we could learn to protect our bodies more, I think that our minds would be in better shape because chronic pain causes you to be mentally stressed too.
Yes, it does.
And she said, oh, I absolutely could do that. So I keep hounding her to do it, but she's, I'll keep working on it. We need it.
Tell her to come up with a series of stretches you can do, sterile stretches.
That's it. That's it. Just 5 or 10 minutes before you start your work day.
Yes.
And there was actually, what triggered this was there was somebody on there who'd been a technician for 32 years. And he said, every day I start with stretches. I start with these exercises that prepare my body for doing what I'm getting ready to do. And I mean, I'm in good shape. My back is still, but I mean, you have people into it who are 2 years into it are going, my back is shot, my knees are shot. I'm like,
Oh,
man,
yeah.
yeah, there's got to be a better way to that. So now, obviously, leaving steady work is a challenge. What was the scariest part of making that change for you to say, I'm just going to leave this paycheck and go and do my thing?
Yeah. And, I had the fortune of I have a spouse who has a job. And so I acknowledge that that's not something that everybody has. And we still had to come up with sort of our exit plan here and determine how much, how much can we realistically have me not work for a while to do this. And so I think just kind of knowing ahead of time what your plan is helpful. We're in a very unusual time right now where if you need to find a job, it seems like it's a little easier than maybe it's been in the
Oh my
past. I
gosh,
read that
yes.
there's 12 openings for every veterinarian who's looking for a job right now.
Mhm.
So I think that that plan is really helpful. And that was how I actually wound up going into hospice care and palliative medicine. Was during my break, I connected with a colleague from my ER days, and she asked if I wanted to do some work with her for that. And it was, that was life-changing to be able to recognize, oh, this is something I can do. It's very different from the clinical work. It's extraordinarily impactful. And anybody who does in-home hospice will say the same thing. Like, you would think that end of life care would be so stressful, but it's drop in the bucket compared to ER. I got so much more gratitude and thanks for, ending a pet's life in a peaceful and meaningful way than I ever did for saving them in
Yeah,
a dramatic,
yeah,
perhaps, way.
yeah.
So it really sort of helped me recenter my perception of what's important to clients.
Mhm, mhm.
We focus so much on the medicine, and it's not about that, and it never has been.
No, no. I was just talking to one of my clients, and he's kind of new on board with me. And I said, look, the first thing that we start with as in a veterinary hospital, a successful one, is hospitality, because we have to build the relationships with our clients so that they trust us. And then we have to educate them. So the second step is education about why all these things are necessary, because we assume that people understand and know, and they know very, very little. And then finally is the medicine. The medicine has to be good, but if you don't follow the path and make those connections and get the human part of it right, then there's always a struggle with the rest of it. And I think that's one of the things that you've certainly managed to coach people in. A lot of the social media stuff, particularly, that you've done, is how to be human with people who are being
Yeah.
difficult. So I'm curious about that, because coming from the place that you did, where this nightmare of 18 months of battle over, just crazy. How did you move into, let me find solutions, let me create solutions for other people when they get into these situations? Because you did say, basically, we set ourselves on fire. Everything that we did wrong in battling this. And so you created a better solutions. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think there were a few different elements that came into play there, and some of it's already solved itself. One is that I didn't have any support because in that situation, medically, we did everything appropriately. Um, Interpersonal wise, in terms of how we communicated what we did everything wrong. And so people thought because you did everything right medically, that would save you. And that's not how it works. Um, and had I had people around me, and I think those things exist quite a bit more now with Not One More Vet, and those support systems are so incredibly important. So that's part of it. But the other part of it is just that preemptive education about what to do when things go south. And it is so hard. People are so stuck on right versus wrong that they are unwilling to make this like short-term concession for long-term game. And so I've started now, when I talk with people about how to respond to reviews, is instead of immediately reacting to that nasty thing they said, you're incompetent, you this, you that, pause and start with the outcome that you want. And that was so critical to me. That was such the light bulb moment when it comes to solutions, is you have a lot more control over these interactions than you think. And instead of interacting based on this one part, understand that this is a long process that will get resolved in either the way you want or the way you don't. And so start with that and then work backwards. And all of that will inform how you respond to that statement. And if you look at it that way, instead of saying, I'm not going to give in to that person because they're wrong and I'm right, like, you look at it as you're controlling the situation, but you have to go in that direction or it's
Right.
not going to work.
Right. One of my favorite books is called Talking to Crazy. And it's great. Oh,
I love the title.
It's written by a psychiatrist, and he's really talking about reactivity. And so I'm Fear Free certified. And so when we're talking about these situations like you're talking about, what you're really talking about is a fearful animal.
Yes.
And people need to understand that. So sometimes I will say this to medical people in my classes, and you can just see the light bulb going off, because I'll put a picture of this dog that's all hackled up and snarling, and then right beside him there's this man, and there's such a parallel between the two that people go, oh, they just jump back. And I said, now tell me what you see that are similar. And they'll say, well, look at the teeth are bared, the eyebrows are arched, and the teeth are in, the arms are all up and puffed up. So everything that we're doing as human beings is exactly what a dog would be doing if it was fearful and afraid. And I said, would you go pet the dog? And they go, no. Then leave the man alone, right?
Yeah. Would you also go yell at it to stop barking?
No. Calm down. Throw some treats, maybe a little Valium, whatever you got.
Yeah, exactly.
Let them calm down. But that's it. We are so we get emotional about it because people are attacking us. And I think a lot of that, we feel like we're angry, but the true diagnosis of the emotion is disrespected.
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
That was the other thing that I recognized. And that was a lesson not only from social media, but just from like book reviews. When my book came out, the first thing my friend said to me, and he's a published author, was don't read the reviews. And I said, what? Why not? He's like, just don't, just trust me on this. Don't, they're not for you. They're for other people. And the worst thing you can do is engage in them. And so I didn't listen to him for about the first week, but then I started seeing these, the 1-star reviews were because Amazon was late delivering the book. Or, they didn't like the fact that All Dogs Go to Kevin didn't have enough cats in it. And you immediately start, but I was so much happier from not reading it. And I think that there is something to be said for people that, who have that feeling of disrespect, is don't make your doctors read reviews that are about them and insult them. It doesn't help. Have that person who's very dispassionate and can understand, the reactive dog, to go in there and do it on your behalf. That protects you, because there is no way. And it's true. Like, I can help somebody else respond to something nasty that's being said about them. But if you said it about me, I would not be able to respond rationally. And that's just human nature. Mm-hmm. So don't make them do it.
It's difficult.
It's not really fair.
It is difficult. One of my favorite quotes is that Viktor Frankl, he's talking about the pause in between whatever the stimulus is, and then what your reaction to it. There is this pause. And then in that pause is when you decide how you're going to react to that. Yes. And I've been fairly logical my whole life. I'm not a highly emotional person, and I'm not one of those touchy-feely people at all. So I'm a problem solver. I like to look at things and like take the puzzle apart. And I do that same thing for people. So when people were, it is hard to read your reviews, because then, as a speaker, we get those too. And you're looking around, like 99 people go, this is the best class I ever took. And then there's the one who goes, this is not worth the money. You're like, were you in the same room with all these other people? Maybe
Yes,
not,
and that's the one that you obsess
but
over.
that's the one you drill down on. And then, but I've told other speakers this, when they were starting out, I said, you got to understand it's not about you, it's about them. And it's in their mindset. Were they open to listening to what you were teaching, or did you hit a nerve and they didn't want it? They didn't want to hear what you had to say because it was too personal and it hit home too hard. And therefore they're going to push back at you. And that's very much about what we're talking about with clients too, because a lot of times when clients give their doctors a hard time, it's because they feel guilty. They didn't catch it soon enough. They didn't know enough. They didn't have enough money. They didn't listen. All of those things are coming up there. And so when you don't take it personally and you step back and go, it's not about me, I did what I was supposed to do. It's about them. But that takes a lot of practice. And I've been working with the public since I was probably 7 or 8 years old. And so I've been practicing it a long time.
Yeah. And it's so true. I think we forget that that element of it, you do have to train for, just like everything else. It takes a lot of exercise before you get that muscle memory to do a suture in your sleep. And the same when you're responding to somebody who's reacting like that, and understand that it's not how you would respond in your day-to-day conversation, right? You put that coat on and you talk differently. But I will say, one of the most profound lessons of being online with Pawcurious is how much easier your life becomes if you already have that trust in there, and people would write to me, and they still do, even though I'm not updating the blog as much, asking for advice. And you don't know me, you don't know, my medical background. Why aren't you talking to your own vet? I'm like, well, I figured I'd start with you. And if you say that my vet sounds like they're on the right path, then I'll stick with that. And it has nothing to do with anything about my background or my pedigree, or it has to do with everything that they've seen me talk for 5 years, 10 years, and they trust that I'm not going to steer them the wrong way. Like, they don't have to know the medicine. They don't have to waste time giving them details that they don't need, because they trust that I know.
Exactly. So when you were kind of making this decision, so you had gotten into this situation you just wanted to get out of, tell me about how you made this decision, because it's got to be hard. There's a lot of education invested, there's a lot of money invested, and it's kind of you should go out and be in practice, right? That's the path, right? They're supposed to do that. So what was the decision making that says, I don't really have to have a traditional veterinary path. I can create my own.
There's a tremendous amount of guilt that comes from stepping away from clinical practice. Even now, people still say, well, don't you miss the pets, or shouldn't you be in practice one day a week, one day a month? And for a very long time, I sort of held on to that. And it took a long time for me to accept the fact that, like, I can still be useful and valuable as a veterinarian without that. So at that time, I was working in home hospice and euthanasia. So I was still doing clinical work. So I was able to kick the can down the road for a little bit with that decision-making process. But then I hit my second curveball, which was when my mother got sick. And so I had been lecturing to people about end-of-life care, and that one of the most profound gifts we can give people is to help them understand that death is okay and we shouldn't be afraid of it. And like literally right in the middle of that, my mom was diagnosed with glioblastoma, which is a very aggressive brain cancer. And it was sort of like all these dominoes just went do, 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 and I felt like everything I had been doing led up to that point, because I had to take the time off to be there for her. She moved in with me and my family, and we were taking care of her. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if I had been in practice. And so, I had that validation after the fact that I made those right decisions for what was important for me. And even in the middle of that, I still felt like I had, important and relevant things to say. And like, I'm still here. I haven't done clinical work for 6 years now, and people still seem to think that, some people still think that, I don't need to listen to you because you haven't been in the hospital, but I have a lot of other things to say. And
Mhm.
so we've gotten to a point now, where a lot of people are really unhappy with clinical medicine, but they don't know what else to do.
Mhm.
And so if there's anything else that I can help people understand, is we're still in this transitional phase. We've got telemedicine. People are really starting to find these little niches for themselves, and don't be afraid to explore them. Like, you may not be ready to make the leap, but do it, put yourself out there, because so many of these opportunities came to me because I was out there. There's things that you don't even know exist, but people will never be able to find you to make those offers if you're not engaging on LinkedIn, out there on Facebook, like creating your personal brand on Instagram, kind of whatever your poison is, take it, and don't be afraid to let people know, I'm here and I have this really cool strength. Um, I don't like I always tell I'm a really good writer. And for a very long time, I didn't want to say that because that was completely useless in veterinary medicine.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
okay, good for you, but it really did serve me well.
Now,
So I
you mentioned like putting yourself out, and of course, I think networking is so important in order to explore all the possibilities that are available. And I'm, you know me, I'm the networking queen. I love people. And so I'm going to talk to a stranger. But there are a lot of people in our profession that are introverts. And you told me, you said, I'm an introvert, and I
introvert.
really need to know that, like how to make connections with people. So tell me, did this take you out of your comfort zone just to push yourself into situations where you were known and available, or connect with a stranger on LinkedIn, or make a comment somehow that said, hey, you know what, I'm interested in talking to you about whatever it is you're doing?
So still one of the most scary things for me is to drop me in a room full of strangers. I just like, that's petrifying and I don't like it. And I think I will always be that way. But dropping me in a room full of strangers and social media, I mean, I don't think I would have this career that I did if it weren't for social media, because being an introvert, it's not so much that I don't know how to talk to strangers. It's just about the volume and the opportunity to pause before I give a thoughtful response. And so there wasn't a problem for me at all to get on LinkedIn and start putting those things out there, because I have control over, the cadence of the interactions. And so I think that there are possibilities for networking that didn't exist before for us introverts. And for me, like, once I know these people, if I've met you online and we've spoken, I can go in the room and talk and I feel much better. But it's interesting how social media has helped the introverts in society sort of parse itself out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I've met so many people on LinkedIn. You being one of them. We started on social media, and but it is easy. It is easy just to comment and say, this is so intriguing, and I think this is such a great idea, and I wish you luck, and how can I help you, and those kind of things. And I think that's one of the things that you have done, and I certainly have tried to do when I'm networking with people, is to see, how can I help? I mean, if there's something that I think is great to share, I'm going to put it out there. I'm going to share it with other people. And I think this is a lot of the things, especially when we're talking about the telemedicine community. I mean, I think I was like, what, number 5 or something in that when you started that.
Yeah.
And then we just, shared it out to everybody. And I just think that's such a great tool to get the word out, to make connections with people, to explore completely new ground here. I mean, I've always been a fan of telemedicine back, 2, 3, 4 years ago, when there was the first glimmer of it. And Charlotte Lacroix and I'd had several conversations about it when she was talking about it and presenting it to the people who regulate the boards, as a matter of fact. And then COVID kind of threw us into it. Like, we have to do these things, and the new technologies that are coming out. These are also things that, I guess we got forced to do in COVID, but there are also opportunities for people who are in veterinary medicine who don't want to do the clinical stuff to still be in the profession, but to just do it a little differently.
What's absolutely fascinating to me about telemedicine is just like everything else. We think it's about the medicine, it's not. We think it's about the technology, it's not. It's about the communication and the relationships. It always has been, and it always will be. And the people that have been the most successful in their uses of telemedicine don't do any diagnosing online. That's what always trips people up. Like, you don't need to give up that hands-on exam that you value so much. In fact, spend more time doing that. You can spend more time doing that if you have done a good job of leveraging your team who are doing the client education and prepping people ahead of time and triaging and all those things that you aren't handling very well or are making people come in to do, and it's very inefficient. Like, that can free up so much time to do the things that you really need to do in-house. And we have so tremendously undervalued that to the point where you have hordes of people. It was fascinating to me. I read a study where they were saying for young veterinarians who left the profession because they were stressed out, like, they still want to be vets, but it wasn't viable for them in the clinical settings that they were in, and they were underemployed. It's not that they wanted to leave, but they had to. And yet we have this tremendous veterinary shortage right now. It's not going to fix itself anytime soon. So it seems so obvious to me,
Me too.
but we're really far behind in making that connection, where if you were willing to let go of some of those things that you're insisting on doing online and let somebody off site handle it, you could have 45 applications from really good veterinarians and really good technicians. You could have it tomorrow. And I know that because I've seen it in the telemedicine community.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
It's there. And we're not asking you to give up anything clinical, anything.
Well, honestly, like I said, I've been doing this since 1985, and my doctors gave away so much time and information doing teletriage. When people call, I just have a question, I just have a question. And I was always adamant about training the staff. And so my staff could answer a great deal of those questions. And the front desk, they were trained, they were tested, they knew the answers to, 90% of the common questions that people ask. I even had a little book that says common telephone questions and the answers, because the same things are asked all the time.
Yep.
And we could triage those things. And if it concerns you this much, we need to get you in. Or no, this is okay. You can do this, this, and this, and call us tomorrow if there's no change. Not to say that they were prescribing anything over the phone, but sometimes it was just, my dog has a tick. There's a torn toenail. There's just stuff like that people are just stressed about. Or my dog's eating grass. There's just so many really common questions that come over on those things. But if we are realistic, and I had just done the Vitus Vet webinar last week talking about hiring. And in the United States, 10,000 baby boomers retire a day.
Wow.
And there is a great deal of retirement going on. It's like there's this mass migration out of cities into rural areas, which may benefit some of the rural practices because, they've now become attractive. But the other thing is that this loss of talent is happening, and owners are retiring, and associates are retiring, and technicians are retiring. And we don't have a large enough population to replenish them, especially since many of them, boomers work insane hours. We think that a 50-hour week is normal. And when you have a millennial veterinarian who's going, no, a 30-hour work week is what I want. Well, guess what? You got to have two to replace the one. Yep. So that's not to say the millennials aren't smarter than the boomers. I'm in one of those generations. So their work-life balance makes much more sense.
I'm Gen X. No one ever talks about me.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, y'all are so.
I can equally disparage both.
Yes, and you're very independent. The Gen X's are so independent because they grew up as latchkey kids. But so they are. There's less angst about work-life balance in the Gen X's than there is in the millennial generations, and they're more resilient too. Just my opinion.
Well, thank you. I try.
Yeah. Obviously, look how well you bounced back from whatever you
Oh my God.
got
I
into.
had no idea I could bounce like this.
There you
I
go.
really thought I was pounded into the ground a few times.
Then here you've just bounced and bounced until you're just like making the goal every time, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Nothing exceptional about me, really. It's just being open to trying something different. I had lived a very regimented life going to medical school. You know, you do this, you go to college, you do this, and da da da. And then I think so many people get out there and it's not what they expected, and then you just flounder. And it's okay to do that. And we're not used to hearing that. Like, it is okay, take a breath, and let other people lift you up when you need it. Those people are out there, and that's really the value of that networking. You know, and if you are in a position to help somebody else, you may not have an opportunity for them, but just validating where they are and helping them see the strengths that maybe they don't identify in themselves can be enough.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was just listening to something that Andy Rourke, I can't remember if he said it or if I just read it, and he talked about goal setting and how you're talking about this regimented life, this goal. I've got to get this, I've got to make the grades, I've got to get out of school, I've got to go get this job. And he talked about setting loose goals, because the goals can change and the goals cannot be so rigid. And I can remember in 2000, I went to VMX. Of course, at that time it was in ABC and changed the name. And I saw Karen Gavsner stand up there and give a lecture. And I thought, maybe one day I might like to do that. I mean, just that was it. That was the loosest goal you can possibly have, having no strategic plan on how to do that. But then, here I am, 10 years, 15 years later, here we are, having, I don't even know how many lectures I've given at this point in the game. But
well, I couldn't graduate with a plan of starting a blog. Like, blogs didn't exist when I graduated,
Yeah.
So you have to be
You're
willing
exactly
to.
right. So, sometimes you just have to be open to what life is throwing out there. And I think that requires some bravery. And people are very afraid of the unknown. And it's just the human nature. It's our limbic brain trying to protect us from getting eaten by tigers. But it's also very self-limiting if we don't just take that deep breath and go, what's the worst that can happen? I think that's a really good exercise to play with yourself and your mind. And just say, okay, if I do take this job, if I do go and write a blog, if I do write a book and somebody thinks I didn't write enough about cats in it, what's the worst thing that can happen?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
I will never forget this moment. I was giving a talk about toxic practices at IAA HPC. So this palliative medicine. And at the time, this was not a first career for anybody because it was such a newly emerging thing. So every single person in the room had come to this from some other facet of veterinary medicine. And I asked the question, how many of you left because you were in a toxic situation? And I would say probably about 90% of the room raised their hands. And I said, how many of you regret leaving? Not a one. Not a one.
Yeah.
And I've never forgotten that, because you forget when you're in that spiral, especially if you're, venting to other people who are there. You sort of get into this echo chamber, and it feels good to vent, but to your point, there's no solutions in it. You're just spinning in circles. And at some point, you do have to make that decision, and it won't be clear. And you are sort of jumping into the void. But however, the alternative is staying where you are. And do you really want to live like that? I remember walking into the ER every day, like literally feeling the acid in my stomach, like that's not a way to live.
Yeah, no. Over the years, I've often said to my students, life is short. You don't get a do-over. Do something you like. And I can truthfully say I've loved every minute of what I've done, even the difficult clients, because, it's how you look at things. And for me, difficult clients are fun because they're a challenge. I say anybody can be nice to nice people. It's a true test of your customer service skills to flip somebody who was being a total jerk into somebody who goes, well, okay, it's all right. And they walk
Yeah.
out the door, a little bit satisfied and not quite as disgruntled as, they wanted to
It's
be.
it's funny how you have these things that you tell yourself to sort of get through that. And for me, it's always like, this is going to be a great book chapter. Like, even if I never write it, just thinking about how am I going to frame this?
Yes.
Just,
Yeah.
it'll be very interesting someday.
Here, this is giving me another story to tell in class. This is the way I kind of look at it. And so Jessica, just for fun, what do you consider to be your biggest career mistake?
I think my biggest career mistake was thinking that I didn't have choices for too long, and just being complacent, even if it was in a situation that wasn't good for me. We spend so much time in school being indoctrinated to sort of this hazing thing, and I'm told it's still kind of going on, and that's not true. Like, you shouldn't be hazed. We're professionals. You shouldn't be abused. That's wild to me, and the fact that I accepted that for a very long time is something that I wish I hadn't done.
Right. Yeah. There's inappropriate behavior, and I've been in and out of some vet schools, and I've talked to a lot of students and some of the VBMAs, and really kind of shocked at some of the behaviors I have heard from the clinicians and how they're treated, and even how they treat people who are referring stuff to them, and this superiority, I'm better than you. And I can remember Cindy Trice saying she heard one of her professors hang up the phone and go, we don't teach them how to be this stupid. And she said, gosh, when I'm a veterinarian, general practitioner, if I'm calling in to a specialist, are they going to say that about me?
Yeah. And potentially, yes.
And potentially, yes, it's completely inappropriate behavior. And it was one of the motivators. I have been doing some work with North Carolina State, and I wanted to get a practice management minor in the pre-vet curriculum, because I said, if students would come through that, first of all, they would have to learn accounting, and they could budget for this honking big student loan that they've got. They would learn marketing, so if they could sell themselves to the practice that they want. They would learn human resources, so they would know when behavior was inappropriate. And a lot of this behavior from these clinicians is absolutely inappropriate, and some of it discriminatory. And then they would have the knowledge and the power to go and report it, and so this behavior would stop. And then finally, they would also be huge assets to a practice, because they would understand the business of veterinary medicine, and they would have a more realistic expectation of what it takes to successfully make money in this profession, because it can be done. And I know that. I think my first practice owner retired with 3 homes, so I know that can be done.
Well done.
Yeah. But yeah, it's really sad that I really feel like sometimes they come out of school with less confidence than they went in.
Yeah, for sure. In a lot of cases.
Mm-hmm. So, what advice would you give someone who is kind of facing this big life or this big career decision?
I think just understand that you will not know how things are going to turn out, and you do have to be like, nothing you can do will give you that crystal ball that guarantees you the outcome you want. And so you plan for it as much as you can, but it's still worth taking that leap, especially if you're miserable. It's different when you're like, okay, and another opportunity presents itself. But if you are miserable, there are very few outcomes that are worse than staying where you are.
Exactly.
Just aren't.
Yeah, exactly true. Yeah, sometimes I think people have learned helplessness, that they've been abused so long in this place of work that they really feel like this is normal, and anywhere else they go will be that bad.
Mm-hmm.
And then
I'm a terrible vet, I'm useless. Like, if I leave here, why is anything else going to be any different? Your degree allows you to do so many different things, and it's okay to explore that and really think about what we weren't taught we were taught to all practice the same things, right? You do this, you do this, you do this, but you have really unique skill sets, and you may not have spent a lot of time thinking about what they are. But the creativity can be an asset in veterinary medicine.
Well, if you think some of the best doctors I know are great clinicians because they're creative thinkers. They use their imagination. They pull in a lot of listening skills that I think we think, oh gosh, here's the formula, it's XYZ. Well, XYZ, an animal will screw you over on XYZ.
Right. Yeah,
exactly. Stuff, right. And so sometimes you have to be a little more creative and be a good investigator and start thinking creatively about what the possibilities would be. I can remember having mixed animal practice, and these, animals would come in and present with something, and the owner's like, I have no idea what's going on with this dog. And then you would look at their history and find out they had a horse, and that the farrier had just been there. And so the dog had eaten a bunch of horse trimmings, and well, now we know, because they love that and horse apples. They love to eat that stuff too. So again, it's just, let's think not what the client is telling me. Let's go on and think about some other big picture stuff. But those are the kind of things that help in a lot of things in life, because if you're a good diagnostician, you can really look at a situation, any situation, and figure it out. As long as you don't get emotionally engaged into the point where your mind locks down and your emotion takes over and your smart brain has gone on vacation. But to use that smart brain for analysis of all kinds of different situations is just kind of incredible.
Yeah. And, knowing that about yourself helps you when you're looking for a job, because maybe there's somebody like they really want someone to do surgery. Like that would not be a good match for me. I don't like it. But maybe there's somebody like they love surgery and they would love for somebody to really just get in there and talk to the allergy people all day. Like that would be a dream job for me. I love talking to people with allergic dogs. It's a puzzle. And apparently it's a nightmare for a lot of my colleagues. Like, oh, yes, I didn't know I could ask for that job, but you can.
Yeah, I can do that. Can I just work all your derm cases? You could come to the South and stay occupied full time.
I'll bet.
Definitely. Well, Jessica, tell me a fun fact about you, something that most people would not know.
So when I left, I was like, the reason that I don't like surgery is because I don't like not having the luxury of thinking of things. So like if something cuts and it starts bleeding, like you have to fix it right away. But I missed using my hands. So I got really into baking because the stakes are a lot lower. So I like to build like sculpted cakes. And every year around Christmas time, I build some sort of gingerbread edifice concoction.
I remember at the beginning of the pandemic, your husband bought you a 50-pound bag of flour.
Yes, he did. And I used it all.
Oh my gosh. Any final words of wisdom and anything you'd like to say about yourself or Connexity's coming up, and I'm excited to be one of your speakers. So thank you for
we're so excited to have you. Yeah. I mean, this is really my dream job. I was so grateful to Heather Lenzer for reaching out. And again, this was one of those things where they really needed this weird skill set that I had, and she wouldn't have known if I wasn't out there doing the writing. And so one is like, don't be afraid or think it's something weird to put out a personal brand. Like it's really just about finding your strengths. And if you don't know what they are, ask the people around you, because they may see something in yourself that you don't. And if you are in a position where you're totally confident and comfortable in all of that, don't forget to acknowledge those little things that you see in other people, because it may be something that they really needed to hear.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Go out and just random acts of kindness.
That's right. Just letting people know that you see them.
Yeah, exactly.
You did such a great job talking to that angry guy. Wow. Like that you have a great skill set with reactive people.
Exactly. Yeah.
Would you like to do it with all of them?
That's right. Here, let me pass them all to you. Well, it's really funny. My staff was more than willing to pass those people to me. Debbie, Mrs. So-and-so is on the phone. And I was like, sure, I can take care of them for you. But you know what? As somebody who is who is good at it and kind of enjoyed the challenge of it, let's put it that way, it also protected the people on my team from having to deal with it. And so it made them have greater job satisfaction. It was no big deal to me, but it made a whole lot of difference to them. And I think, a lot of managers do that. A lot of managers are pretty good at it. It's part of, it really has to go in the job description. Can handle disgruntled clients very well and disgruntled team members very well. But that's it's very important to protect people, as best you can. And if I was your manager, Jessica, when you were working the ER, you wouldn't have had that problem. I'd have taken care of your stuff.
Yeah. I mean, ER work probably wasn't the best match for me anyway, but
ER is, man, I ran ER for 3.5 years. I got to tell you, it's a different world. I said, from 6 p.m. until 8 a.m. in the morning, there's 3 options for clients, and that's typically drunk, high, or crazy. And they all come in with something half dead and $20. So it is a different world. Yeah. Not all. Oh, we had a lot of great clients who came in at all hours, but truthfully, the ones you remember are the ones who were just, whoa, crazy stuff.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. my head's already like, oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
You start remembering the story. There's so many stories.
Yes.
So many stories. Do you have a favorite book that you'd like to give a shout out about?
Well, All Dogs Go to Heaven.
Well,
it's probably my favorite one. No, actually, and besides that one, I really like On Writing by Stephen King. It's a book about the technicalities of writing, and it was one of the most accessible, well-written things. If you're interested in writing, it will help you write more clearly, succinctly, and effectively.
Cool. We'll put that in the show notes. And as I told you, I have an ambition to write a book.
Yes, yes.
Who knows when spare time, but I will take a look at this. Oddly enough, I saw him interviewed last night.
Oh, very nice.
He is, yes, he was on 60 Minutes, and it's how, he's just a prolific writer. Yes. And he sits down and writes every day, just whether he feels like it, whether he feels inspired, he just starts. And usually he said that works, is just start. So maybe that's what I need to do, is just start.
Just start. Yeah. Just take that leap, especially when it comes to writing. You will nobody spits out a perfectly formed book, right? You spit out your raw materials and then you start putting them together. And that's also very hard.
Yep. And get a good editor, because
please get a good editor.
Yeah.
Please do. Even if you think you're a good writer, there are ticks and things that you do not see because it's your own words.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. I see some articles that come through in some of the trade magazines. I'm like, there should have been an editor involved in that.
Oh yeah. And it's hard because I've dealt with that so many times with veterinarians where they refuse to let you edit. Like, I know what I'm talking about, and this is good. Like, it is great content. It doesn't read well. It's not, please, like, why are you offended? That happens to me all the time.
Yes.
But it's just,
I've had a lot chopped out of many articles, and you just go, okay, that's fine. That's good. Somebody else who's professional at that needs to clean up your work, because it can get wordy, or, it doesn't read well, doesn't make sense. Yes. And it usually is better. You look at it and they go, well, we made this change and this change. What about this? Well, you know what? That's better.
That's my other piece of advice. If you are writing, and that's great, like, let them edit you. It will make you better.
Yeah. And I think that's with everything in life. Accept feedback. Yeah. You are not perfect, and nobody is perfect. And you can't get better unless you accept and actually solicit feedback from people. Like, what did you think? How can I improve? How can I make this better? And so many people get offended when somebody gives them appropriate feedback. And, you have to do it well. You don't have to be mean to people, but you do need to give people some feedback. I gave a new speaker, she didn't ask me, but I heard her giving a little talk one day, and we'd been having a conversation, and I said, this is kind of unsolicited advice, but you do something that I find myself doing too. And that is, at the beginning of every sentence, you go, so, this and this is so,
And
be
you would
aware.
never know. You would never know unless somebody told you.
Unless somebody told you, because it's like saying, it's just a little filler phrase, and it takes self-discipline and breaking a habit to not do. So how's this?
Yeah, it's true. It's true. There's so many things when I watch myself after, when on a recording, realizing, oh, ugh.
And fortunately, people give you grace, and they want you to win. They want you to succeed because they want to have a good presentation from you. So that's always a good plus to keep in
And
mind.
yeah, and I guess that's the difference between, unsolicited feedback from the general population or feedback from somebody who really has your best interest in mind. That's always been the best feedback I've gotten after speaking to, is somebody who sought me out and pointed out the so's, or said, you just, whatever these things are, you're standing there and it's, better to stand over here. I never would have known.
Nope.
Thank you.
Nope, you can't. You can't. And we're always our own worst critics. So watching yourself is difficult when you're
Painful.
doing that. I
Yeah.
hate to hear yourself recorded or on the phone, but you know what? You still need to do it, because
You get
can't get better.
desensitized to it over time.
You do, but that's how you get better. You just
Yep,
gotta
exactly.
practice to get better.
Exactly.
Well, Jessica, thank you so much for taking your time today and being on the program. And I'm just excited to see what you're going to do next, because my goodness, every time there's something else, there's always something else. So I know there's the telemedicine conference is coming up soon, and then you're working on Connexity.
Connexity is going to be fun.
It is going to.
They gave me way too much creative leeway with that conference. Like, ooh,
well,
can you do a game show?
Yeah, our May one was fun.
It was fun.
It was fun. So we had good panel discussion there. So I'm looking forward to seeing where your creative mind takes a conference that is built on connection and creativity. So very exciting.
It'll be fun. There will be an escape room.
Oh, good times.
That's already done.
All right. Yay. Yay. All right. Thank you again for being on the show. And we will have all your information tagged in the show notes so people can get in contact with you. And I look forward to seeing you soon.
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
Thank you so much.